Hello, today we are going to go over the intake checklist in NewOrg. I've logged into NewOrg under my name, and we are going to view the checklist for the Clark family. To see a checklist in NewOrg, from the Main Contacts tab, you will open the contact view of the family you're wishing to look at. And on the primary caregiver, you will see the intake checklist button. When you press the intake checklist button, a tab will open on your browser, bringing you to the intake checklist. The top of the intake checklist is a brief paragraph explaining, just kind of summarizing what you might see in the checklist. Let's read this now. Welcome to the intake checklist. The intake checklist is a one-stop shop to view all of the contact, event, and form information needing to be entered on the system before ongoing services begin. The checklist will show a single contact row for each individual entered under a family. Not all of these fields will be populated for every family member. Most of the time, the information reflected on the checklist will come from completed events entered under the child being served and will show as a green check mark that is linked to the field or event. When there is not information entered under a child field, you will see a red circle icon with an exclamation point. If the child is not being served by the program, these red icons will remain red. You will also see not applicable on those child fields listed under an adult or other role. If at any time there is a green check mark showing on a not applicable field, you may click on the check mark, update the contact on the event or form, and then click Save. The Event Primary Contact document, or cheat sheet, is an additional resource found under the Main Files tab of NewOrg that can help in identifying which contact should be checkmarked under an event. Generally, the child being served will show a green check mark under all column fields except for the initial FRA and IFGP. And the primary caregiver of the child will show a green check mark under the initial contact, encounter, FRA, and IFGP event column fields. To view a first ever FRA or IFGP when there are multiple children being served in a family, you may choose to add the child being served to both of these initial events. Okay, when I look at the Clark family, I can see that Calvin, Tommy, and Dad are additional contacts on this family. So when viewing their checklist, we see all members of the family. If you wanted to click in to any member of this family, you can see that it is hyperlinked straight to their contact record. You can also see the roles for any member of this family. And again, it's a hyperlink where you can click the link and be taken to their contact records. Status is simply the status of the family. That can be an individual status or the family as a whole. Child enrollment status. This column will come from a child enrollment event. Child subcontact record. This field will come from the subcontact info tab on the child contact. An initial contact event. This information will come from entering it's number 5. I can't ever remember if it's called program contact, personal contact. Sorry about that. This record populates from a personal contact event entered. And usually that can be the child and mom on the event. Child screening for eligibility event. This will populate when there is a screening for eligibility event entered for the child being served. Within the screening for eligibility event is a screening for eligibility form. The screening for eligibility form and event column will populate when that form is then completed or began. Child interview form. This will populate when a family interview form has been entered, and then question 1 of that form, which is a child drop-down question, when the child chosen is put in question 1, it will populate this field of their intake checklist. Then moving through the screenings, the screening event, each screening event, developmental, hearing, health, social, emotional, and vision. Once that screening type is chosen, with the child being served, their intake field will be populated. And then finally, to begin services, their first home visit, which might be a personal or prenatal account or event, will be populated once the event is chosen and the child being served is on the event. Family resource assessment event, this one will typically show up under mom. And the first goals event will typically show up under mom. And because there are multiple children in this family, if you wish or would like to see the additional children's first FRA and IFGP, because this won't change for mom, it will stay with the older sibling, I can show you how you might reflect that with a younger or additional sibling. Okay, so let's get started looking at Calvin Jr. I can see Calvin Jr. is a child who's active. Here we see that he is enrolled, and then there is a date that hyperlinks to 3/25/2018. If I were to click on this, it's going to take me into the event, the enrollment event that was entered for Calvin on 3/25/18. Child subcontact record is also green. If I were to click on the green check mark, it's going to take me into this child subcontact record. And simply creating the record and choosing the child being served under the contact, activating subcontact status and hitting save will change it to green, even if you aren't able to answer all of the selected fields. For initial contact event, again, I see the date of 3/15. If I were to click on that, it will open into our personal contact event. You can see at the top in the event line, we have chosen to put initial visit with Calvin. And the people icon here is what tells us there are additional people on this event. If we were to click edit, we might see that. I'm assuming that's probably mom. And when we look down here under mom, we can see her initial contact event is also 3/15. Child screening for eligibility event. When I click on the date, it's going to take me to Calvin's screening for eligibility event. I'm just putting in an event note there because it looks like that was missed. Okay, and then within that same event is the eligibility form. And here is our form for Calvin. There was the event we were just in, Calvin, our eligibility form dated 3/22. Child interview, if I were to click on this, here's the child interview form. You can see the contact on the form is Misty Clark. So for that reason, for the intake to populate for the child, it is going to pull off of whichever child is chosen in question 1. Because this was recently added, you may have some interview forms that you're seeing not reflected in the intake checklist. Go to those forms, open them up, and be sure that there is a selection made in the child dropdown. Child screening event development, when I open this, our screening event opens for Calvin, and we can see down here all of the different screening types. So on the checklist, it is this dropdown that will populate for the different screening fields. Hearing It will look similar. And then here in screening type, we see that hearing is chosen. Health and screening type, we can see that health is chosen. Keep in mind for the events to show, they also need to be marked to complete. So if you would have an event that was still pending here, it may not be showing on the checklist simply because it needs to be updated to a complete status. For the social emotional screening, we can see that screening type social emotional was chosen. Vision, screening type vision. The personal encounter, we can see here, this field will reflect either a personal or prenatal encounter visit. When you click on the event, will come up. We can see it's a personal encounter. Calvin, personal encounter. I can see additional people are on this event. Event date, complete. And then with the family resource assessment, I'm going to click on it. And when you look at the cheat sheet, the family resource assessment is a family event, meaning only the primary caregiver needs to be included on the event. So if you chose, if you really wanted to see Calvin on this event, on this initial one, you could add him by clicking edit. Next to the contact, then we're just going to add Calvin to the event and close. And now watch right here in this field, because I've added him, when I refresh my checklist, we should see the green check mark for Calvin. Okay, so that is what this last paragraph means, or the last sentence of the last paragraph to view first ever FRA. If it's really bothering you and you would like to see this event check marked on the checklist, by all means, you can do so, but we didn't want you to think that you had to add the child to every FRA or goals event out there. And here is the initial goals event. Going to click on 325. And we can see again, family service goal plan completed. And I just put the note up there to remind myself that I could add Calvin Jr. to this event for the purposes of showing his initial IFGP on his checklist. Okay, so we've walked through basically what each row and column of the intake checklist is, and now we will begin to populate the checklist for Tommy. You have the ability to enter these beginning events straight from the checklist, and as always, you also can enter these events in this way from your event menu. I'm going to do a little bit of both today. Okay, let's begin with Tommy. It says no enrollment here. I'm going to click on the no enrollment hyperlink, which brings me into the enrollment event. It has put Tommy there. I'll identify that Tommy is who I am enrolling. And let's just say Tommy was enrolled on 2/3/2020. As long as I hit complete. And populate my event. I'm going to hit refresh just so we can see that immediate change, and I may not hit refresh as we work through the rest of these fields. Okay, and there as I refreshed, we could see that the enrollment now says 2/3/2020, and there's a hyperlink into that event that we just entered. Let's continue on with Tommy. going to click the red exclamation point for the subcontact. Here, I'm going to hit Tommy and activate it. If I knew other information for this subcontact info record, I might fill this in, but simply by putting it, if I were to hit refresh, and that actually took me then to his subcontact info record. That will be just a small hiccup that I'll talk to NewOrg about though. Initial contact event, if we were to click from the checklist, here we have Tommy's initial. And let's say that that happened. He enrolled on 2/3 and they first came to the program around 127. If I were to hit save here, I might add mom to this event. The purpose of adding Tommy, even though Tommy is an infant to this event, is so that it reflects, has the initial visit for Tommy. We know this might have occurred with just mom, between mom and the home visitor, but to show that this event was about or for Tommy, we have included Tommy. Okay. Now, if I hit refresh, we will see the initial contact event column update to 127. Now, we added mom to that event, but notice hers didn't update to 127. That is because these event columns are first ever events for the contact row that it's being applied to. So for mom, it is still true that the first initial contact event entered with her name attached to it was on 3/15, which was associated with Calvin. So when looking at the child being served, here we see 127 for Tommy. Okay. Next, screening for eligibility. This opens us up to Tommy's screening for eligibility. And let's do eligibility screening and enrollment, we're on the same day. Go ahead and hit complete and save. I'm going to leave that as such real quick just to show you guys. If I was to refresh, you would see that the screening for eligibility event is now going to turn to a green check mark, but the form is still going to be red. And this is simply because of where I am at in my screening for eligibility event. If we were to create the form, a tab opens. Here's Tommy. Let's match up his form date to his event date. And I'm just going to fill in one question and hit save changes for the purposes of completing the form. And now, screening for eligibility form, if I were to hit refresh, we can see that it will turn green. Ta-da. All right, moving on, the child interview form. If you click on the exclamation point, again, this is going to open a blank form. So if you feel like there's a form out there that you've already entered, I suggest going to the Forms and Surveys tab from the main contact view and looking there first and being sure that question 1 is populated. So here, let's just say it was Valentine's Day, and I'm going to put Tommy. If we were filling out this form, I would then choose autosave and begin to fill out my form. By choosing Tommy, I would be able to then go through my form. I'm going to fill in one more question, but because Not all of the questions are required on this. We can move across each page of the form. We're going to hit Save Changes. Close out a couple of these browsers. And here we know that our form is completed. We can return into the form. We may choose to print the form, or if we're done with the form, we simply close the tab. And if I were to hit refresh on the checklist, I will now see the red exclamation change with a hyperlink into the form just created. For child development, let's click on that. Tommy, I might say Tommy, initial development. And let's say that these happened on the 17th. Screening type, by choosing development, that is what will make my checklist turn green. Typically, we would have filled in the rest of those drop downs too, but for our purposes today and saving time, we're just going to move through these screening events a little quicker. Initial hearing, Tommy. And we're just going to use the same event date for all of these. Health. Initial health, Tommy. Screening type, hearing. Complete, closed. And typically we would say prevention initiative, home visiting, and fill in our events more completely. Going to hit refresh on our checklist. We should now see the developmental box populate and the hearing box. Both have populated. Now for the health and social, emotional, and vision, I'm going to jump back here to the family and enter them in this route. I have gone to the event display menu from the main contacts tab, chosen the screening event, new event. That opens up my event field where I choose Tommy. Which one were we on? I'm going to say Tommy, initial, social, emotional, and ASQSE. Let's do complete closed. For screening type, we have social, emotional. Screening tool, ASQSE. And then our event is complete. And I noticed I did not change that date. That is today's date. So if we were to look at the checklist on that one, it will say, I'm going to click over here to the checklist, refresh. And this is the field we just entered. And it says to 2520. We'll enter one more vision one in this way, and then let's move to the personal encounters. Screening event, new event. Tommy. Screening type, vision. And then let's hit save and close. All right, so you get the idea of that events can be entered directly from the checklist or in the way that we have been entering events from the main contact tab. The checklist, the idea behind the checklist is just to help fill in all of those event contact and form areas that need to be filled in before services begin. When you get to the point of your first home visit, we are assuming that each of these steps has occurred. When it is time for the first home visit, it is an encounter visit, either a personal encounter or prenatal encounter. So for Tommy, I'm going to put initial home visit Tommy. And the reason I'm putting Tommy's name on this is because I know that this is a family that has multiple children enrolled in the program. And by clicking complete and closed, this will reflect on the checklist. And on that one, typically we do have mom and child on that. We'll hit refresh. And then we will enter Tommy's initial FRA and IFGP events. Because this is under the primary contact, we would go Family Resource Assessment, New Event. Mom is on the event. Just left myself a little note that might explain why I'm adding Tommy to this Family Resource Assessment event. So once I hit complete and closed, fill in my program and division. Here I'll click the initial save, which will then open up for additional contact members to be added to the event. You can also see that our forms are down here for the Family FRA and Child FRA. I'm going to go ahead and click Edit next to my primary contact on the event and add Tommy. Once Tommy is added, I can click Close to close out the event. I'm going to click over to my intake checklist, hit refresh. You will notice for mom, the first ever FRA entered under her contact record, the date won't change, but because we added Tommy to that event, we see that initial FRA record for him. The same would go for IFGP, and I hesitate from starting here because we know with those last two columns, they are events whose primary contact on the event is the primary caregiver. So here we might say initial IFGP with Tommy and family, because this could of course be for other members of the family as well if Calvin had goals. Then I'm going to go Control End to go to the bottom of my event. Once I hit save, the additional contact, I can now add additional contacts to this event for purposes of reflecting first ever or initial goal setting for Tommy. Here I've added Tommy to the event. Once he's added, I can close out, go back to the checklist, refresh, and now we have worked through populating a child being served and walking through each of the items on their checklist, except for the health screening event. So let's go ahead and enter that real quick. Screening type is health, I think, right? I'm gonna click over here. Yeah. We'll just say save and close, and that should complete Tommy's checklist. As you continue to enter events for Tommy now, you would do so from the main contacts tab. So the checklist is just an area that you're able to look at and review those services that are required before the first home visit and then ongoing direct services. The last thing I wanted to show you around the checklist is that under the Reports tab, this is the Reports tab, and then there you'll find a report that says Child Intake Checklist. If you hover over it, it says this report will show any currently enrolled child's intake checklist and allows for these lists to be printed. So because these checklists have quite a few events on them, this report is limited to only the currently enrolled checklist. So once you run, I have ran this report for those assigned to Nicole Craft. So here is a list of my currently enrolled children. And then you have a print button up here, which is a little different than the rest of the reporting in NewOrg. And I wanted to just give you an idea of the print view. So once you click print, here are the checklist for all of my currently enrolled children. If I were to do Control P to actually print this out, you will see that it is one checklist per page. So that is a way to see all of those children currently enrolled in their checklist in one setting or viewing. And you could choose, instead of printing it, you could choose to save it as a PDF at that point if you want. Okay, so that covers the intake checklist. Again, let's take one last look at it. We have each row of a family member. When it says not applicable, those are those child event fields listed under the adult or other role. So we're guiding users to hopefully not fill in events with those as the main contacts. Now, if any of these were to be checkmarked, you could simply click on that event and change out the event contact. Okay, if you have any questions on the checklist, you can always reach out to me via email, phone. We can set up a virtual meeting. My email is Nicole, Nichole @babytalk.org, and we will plan to put this recorded meeting on our BTPA resources page of the portal, as well as our NewOrg playlist in YouTube. So at this time, I am going to stop the recording.